Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with my next little sort of wrap up recent reads, whatever the fuck I'm calling it. I don't know. This is basically just wrapping up some of the final sort of little Halloween bits and bobs that I read. Some of these leaked over into November, but they're all spooky, so I'm just considering it all part of sort of the post Halloween haul or whatever. Reading's been tough lately. As I've mentioned in my previous videos, we've been busy. There's lots of stuff going on. We're going to be flying out to England in about 2 weeks. So there's just a lot to focus on, and I haven't been able to get as much reading as I would like, but I read some spooky things over Halloween, especially towards the end of Halloween. Halloween itself went pretty well. Hung out with some friends. We gave out some candy. We watched a bunch of movies. It was nice. But yeah, so let's start with the first book that I read, which was Nightbooks by J.A. White. I don't have my copy here because I lent it, or I gave it to Laura, but I can put up a picture here. So yeah, I read this because I watched the film version on Netflix, I think last Halloween, and it actually surprised me how much I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much, I went out and bought the book right after watching the movie, and then I rewatched it again this year because I wanted to show it to the girls, because it's that time of the season, and I thought they would enjoy it. And that reminded me, oh, I have the book. So I went and dug out my copy and I read it. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. So if you don't know, the premise of Nightbooks, it's about a young kid named Alex Mosher, who's he's a budding horror author. He has reams and reams of notebooks that he refers to as his Nightbooks, where he writes down all manner of scary stories. And he's obsessed with horror. He watches all the horror movies. He dresses in, horror memorabilia. He has the posters, everything. Lives and breathes horror, but because of that, that sort of leads to a lot of sort of discrimination and bullying and sort of weird looks from people in his life. And he goes down to the boiler room in an attempt to burn his Nightbooks in an attempt to be normal. And along the way there, he gets tricked by this mysterious witch named Natasha, who lives in this magical apartment that seems to be fueled by scary stories, and she tells him that, in order to stay alive, he has to tell her a different scary story every single night. So this boy who, was trying to get rid of the sort of the darkness inside of him to sort of purge the bad parts of himself, now has to rely on what was once thought of as a negative in order to survive. And while in the apartment, he meets one other captive named Yasmin, who's a young girl. And they end up sort of forming a friendship and working together to try and figure out a way out of this apartment, out of this witch's clutches. So yeah, this was a really good book. I obviously enjoyed the movie, but in a lot of respects, I think the book was even better. There were some things that I thought the movie did a little better in terms of the pacing of the story and the way that it revealed certain things, but the book was great. It has that sort of fairy tale-esque, sort of a Neil Gaiman, kind of Coraline sort of feeling, sort of a darker fantasy horror story for children. It's really it's really imaginative and exciting, and there's lots of stuff about writing and being a horror fan, which of course obviously really spoke to me as somebody who loves books, who loves writing, who loves horror. And one of the things that really surprised me about the book, in contrast to the movie that I really enjoyed, was that the book has a much stronger emphasis on sort of the art of storytelling. Because, the whole premise of the story is that he has to read a different scary story every night to Natasha, and there's a lot of discussion in the book about sort of what makes a good story, what makes a good scary story, pacing, drafting, revision. It's almost like a mini sort of creative writing class for kids, which I thought was really interesting as someone who is also, fancies themselves a writer. It was really enjoyable. It's really imaginative and fun. Natasha, of course, has a cat familiar named Lenore, who in the book is a big, fluffy orange cat, and in the movie is a sphinx, one of the changes that I actually enjoyed. But she can turn invisible, and she's always sort of Natasha's spy. She's watching over them. Alex works out of this giant, magnificent library that's depicted on the cover. Where Natasha keeps all of her books, and every single book in there is a collection of scary stories. And she says, I've read all of them. I need new stories, which is why she's sort of hired Alex to write more. So yeah, there's just a lot of stuff about books and reading and literature and the love of horror that really resonated with me, especially as a horror fan. one, there's a lot of horror references, both in the book and the film. And two, there's a lot of stuff in the book about being a horror fan, about what makes someone become a horror fan. You know, there's lots of reminiscences from Alex about sort of his first inklings of, loving horror and how that led down this path, And as I also mentioned, there's a lot of stuff about sort of the bullying and harassment and sort of the weird looks and the discrimination and the weird people the way that some horror fans are treated, like why do you like that, and how like people kind of look at you funny and stuff. And that's, again, that relates to my experience growing up, being into all this dark horrible stuff, and people thinking you're a psycho and stuff like that. So it's very true to the experience of being a horror fan, in my experience. The book is more of sort of a classical horror romp, I would say. There's a lot of references to older films like Night of the Living Dead, whereas in the film, it's much more 80s influenced. It was produced by Sam Raimi, so it has a little bit of that Sam Raimi vibe in parts. Like an example is that in the book, Alex gets seduced into the apartment by pumpkin pie and a horror film on TV. In the book, the film that's on TV is Night of the Living Dead. In the movie, it's The Lost Boys, so that kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of the overall differences in tone and vibe between the two stories. But I really liked both. The movie is a pretty faithful adaptation of the book. It gets all the points across. There's a few things, obviously, that they had to kind of reduce a little bit for what I assume are budgetary reasons. The book's a little bit more ambitious and expansive in its scope than the film, but it's still the same story, the same characters, the same themes, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I was really disappointed because at the end of the film they imply that there's they set it up for a sequel, which of course Netflix is never going to make. But I found out reading about the book that the author J.A. White wrote a sequel, which I definitely want to read. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. If you love sort of like children's horror, sort of dark fantasy, that kind of vibe, I think you would really love this. If you're a horror fan, you'll probably really enjoy it. If you're looking for kind of a gateway horror for, your kids or something like that, I think this is a great option, both the book and the film. So yeah, I would highly recommend that. It was a perfect Halloween read, and the movie's a good Halloween watch too. So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. So for my next read, I wanted to read more scary stories. I wanted to focus on stuff, that's more adult. I love reading children's horror. I'm always watching, Goosebumps, I read Nightbooks, and, I'm always engaging with that stuff, especially around spooky season. But I wanted to read something more for adults, and I wanted to read something that was on my shelves instead of taking a book out from the library like I've been doing a lot of. So I grabbed this. This is They Lurk by Ronald Malfi. This is 5 novellas. Ronald Malfi is an author I've heard a lot about. I know he's mostly known for the novels Blackmouth and Bone White. And again, I've heard a lot about him. I see his books everywhere. I'm always seeing him when I go to the bookstore, and I see him in the horror section and stuff like that. And I actually bought this and another collection of novellas based on the recommendation of someone at the Barnes & Noble. This is several months ago. I was at a Barnes & Noble, and I overheard a woman speaking with her boyfriend about, Ronald Malfi and how much she enjoyed him, and they were in the horror section, and I don't often meet other people in the wild who like this sort of stuff, so I started talking with her a little bit about it, and I was like, what do you recommend, and she was like, oh, these are really good, and blah, 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 so I love horror short stories, so I grabbed these, and I finally decided to read this one for Halloween. Unfortunately, I thought this was a little disappointing. So there's 5 novellas in here, and they're all decently written. There's nothing wrong with them, on like a structural level or a prose level or anything really. For me, they just never really sort of came alive. There was never that like little spark to make it go from okay to like good. There was nothing that really stuck with me. I can just talk a little bit about each one and sort of what I liked or didn't like. So the first story is called Skullbelly, and it's about a private detective who's investigating the disappearance of these 2 kids. There were 3 kids who went off into the woods, but only one of them came back, and he's like catatonic, and he's got like an injury across his stomach, and he's like all fucked up. So the detective goes to the town and investigates kind of around and asks people about them in the forest, and he finds out about this urban legend of this mysterious creature called Skullbelly that lives in the trees and attacks people and stuff, sort of a boogeyman type figure. this started the collection off on a bit of a whimper, I thought. You know, I've heard this type of story millions of times before, you know, the small town hiding the secret of a mysterious creature that nobody wants to talk about, you know, connected to a string of disappearances, you know. Like I said, it was all fine, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was like, you know, I've been here before, and I just felt like he didn't really find any new sort of way to capture that or to tell the story. You know, that the atmosphere was okay, but again, it's like, you know, a small town, you know, with a creepy forest. You know, I've seen it all before, so that was a little disappointing. The next story was The Separation, which was a little bit different. This one takes place in Germany, which is about this psychologist named Marcus and his old friend Charlie, who was a boxer, and and Charlie is basically sort of having a breakdown after his divorce from his wife, and he's been like hanging out at his wife's sort of a mansion that she's gone off to live in another place, but he's hanging around her mansion that's sort of abandoned while people are like moving stuff out and like kind of cleaning it out, you know, removing all remnants of him from her life essentially. But he's basically almost catatonic as well, although he claims to be his ex-wife has a restraining order out on him, although he claims to not remember doing any of these things, going to go see her. The psychiatrist basically and everybody around him thinks that, you know, Charlie is suffering from a nervous breakdown, but it's implied that there may be something more mysterious at work. No spoilers, but this one was again, this one was just okay. I liked the change of setting, and the character was completely different from the private detective in the first story, so the voice was very different, and I thought that was handled really well. That kind of told me, like, okay, he can write kind of in different voices and tones, you know, that was encouraging. But again, the overall sort of reveal of the story and everything else sort of around it, you know, the atmosphere, the build-up, like, none of it really came off for me. You know, a lot of the sort of scare sequences just felt very rote and kind of uninspired, in my opinion. The overall reveal at the end of the story was interesting. It had this sort of surrealist, almost sort of Twilight Zone-esque kind of twist that I really liked, but it really wasn't enough to save the rest of the... You know, this is a novella. It's like 45, 50, 60 pages, you know. So that's a lot of stuff to get through for, you know, very little payoff, and I just thought it just, I don't know, again, it was just okay, but it didn't really come alive for me. And that leads us on to the third story, which is called The Stranger, and this is about a guy named David, an older guy named David, who has a much younger girlfriend, and they're going on this like trip down the coast or whatever. You know, it's like they're going on this big road trip, and he's basically deciding. He's basically decided over the course of this trip that he's kind of fallen out of love with her. He no longer believes that, you know, they have any kind of spark or chemistry, and he's just kind of deciding how to tell her about it. And they stop off at a motel. He has a few drinks. You know, the girlfriend, you know, takes a shower, all that stuff. You know, doing their nightly ablutions. You know, and there's this mysterious man, you know, raggedy-looking man with, you know, scruffy beard, you know, messed up suit, who just goes and sits in David's car and locks the door and brandishes a gun to keep people out. And as things start to escalate and the cops arrive and all the other hotel patrons come out and start looking around at what's going on, the guy starts mutilating himself, you know, eating his own body and, you know, like cutting himself open and, you know, eating his own flesh. And it's just this very slow, painful, agonizing sort of auto-cannibalist thing that they're watching. And it seems to be kind of related somewhat to sort of the emotional things that David is going through, I think. This is one of those things where it was interesting. I really liked the sort of the surrealist aspect of it, how this guy just... It starts doing this and there's no explanation for what or why or anything. Almost kind of sort of a David Lynch vibe, sort of. I liked that aspect of it. But sort of it felt a little bit self-consciously strange to me, you know, like he was purposefully not pretentious, but that he was kind of purposefully making it weird to sort of give it more resonance than it really had. You know what I mean? And as I said, it's obviously meant to sort of parallel some of the emotional things that David is going through in some way, but the way that it paralleled that just felt a little murky and unclear, which obviously was probably the intention, but it was better than the other two. Like, it was more arresting, and the gore was like really well written and very gross and surprisingly like like I said, it's a very slow, agonizing sequence of events, and the horror of it was conveyed very well. But again, I was just very, you know. The fourth story is After the Fade, which is, again, about a guy who's part of, like, a traveling band. You know, they're not, like, super successful, but, you know, they're on the road, they're making money, you know. He's not a big rock star, but he's making a living, you know, and he's basically going to this bar in Annapolis to go break up with his girlfriend because he realizes that, one, he's kind of fallen out of love with her, and two, he can't really like string her along if this is going to be his life on the road, you know, moving constantly, playing shows, all that kind of thing. But while in the bar, before he can tell her anything, a woman walks in, you know, all bloodied and you know, and out of it, and she collapses, and there's this sort of giant mosquito bug looking thing, you know, with this big like whip like tail, you know, scorpion tail that's like hooked into her brain, and it's, you know, it was like sucking her brains, and it escapes, you know, and they kill it, and then they look outside and they see tons of these, you know, mysterious bug things swarming everything. And they lock the doors, you know, they close the fireplace, you know, they seal the place off, and they basically have to wait it out amidst this sudden apocalypse. This improved as well. I thought this was more concise and tightly written and more confident than the previous novellas. The sort of emotional sort of stakes of the story were well drawn. Not just the stuff between, you know, the boyfriend and the girlfriend, but, you know, the patrons of the tavern and everything. But as you can already guess, I just kept thinking while I was reading this, man, this is just The Mist, basically. You know, this is Stephen King's The Mist, where you have a bunch of people trapped in a small enclosed space during this apocalyptic event, and, you know, it's about sort of the breakdown of order. And it's not a bad version of that, you know. The characters were decently drawn. As I said, the emotional stakes were well done. I liked that it was kind of a more unusual apocalyptic event rather than just, you know, like, you know, zombies or mysterious creatures or whatever. You know, it was a little bit weird and unusual. And again, they don't explain where any of these creatures came from, and I liked that. But again, it was just hard to shake that feeling of, like, you know, been there, done that. You know, it's not, as I said, it's not a terrible version of that type of story, but it wasn't incredible. And there was a twist at the end that I thought was interesting, as sort of where, no, I don't really want to spoil anything, but essentially you think it's one type of apocalypse, and then it turns out to be another type of apocalypse. And it was interesting as a sort of little, I guess you'd say, sort of an apocalyptic preamble. But I almost kind of just wish that, like, he had explored that more, or I don't know. Again, it was just one of those things where it was okay, but not amazing. And then that leads us to the final story, which is the longest novella in the collection, which is called Fierce. And this is about a girl and her mother who are sort of, you know, it's during the Christmas holidays. They're driving home from her father's house in, you know, heavy snow, and they almost collide with a truck. And the mother gets out to talk to the truck driver, and the truck driver seemingly murders her with a crowbar. And so now this 18-year-old girl, all alone, you know, in the cold, in the snow, in the middle of nowhere, has to survive being pursued by this crazed, you know, killer. I do think this was the best story in the collection. It's the longest, and I think because of that, it has the most time to sort of really flesh itself out and let you get to know the characters and understand the emotional stakes and to really develop kind of the atmosphere and the overall sort of frisson of terror. And I thought it was pretty well done. You know, the cold, biting, snowy atmosphere was pretty well carried off. I liked the resourcefulness of the main character, how she's not just kind of your typical, you know, teenage girl stereotype, you know. He allows her to be more than just that. There's a lot of themes about sort of motherhood and, you know, protecting your young and sort of like finding the strength within yourself, because it keeps cutting back to a time when the girl was a little kid and her and her mother went camping and they were attacked by this by a mountain lion, I think it was. and that sort of that left them with injuries and stuff. But the mother was able to beat the mountain lion away until it left them, and get them to safety and all that. And now the sort of the tables are kind of flipped, where she has to go and try and see if she can escape, and then and find her mom and stuff. So I thought that was an interesting sort of role reversal. And throughout the story, she keeps having sort of hallucinations of the mountain lion that sort of serves as like a metaphor of her sort of inner strength and her conscience of sorts, sort of guiding her. And as it goes on, it gets a lot more sort of grindhousey and a little bit weird. Again, no spoilers, but I thought it was all very interesting, and I thought it worked pretty well. I did find out in the afterword that this novella, Fierce, was the most recent novella that was written for this collection. The rest of these were much older, from around like 2010 and thereabouts. So yeah, it ended on a high note, but again, it wasn't really enough to kind of bring up the rest of the collection. So knowing what I know, that a lot of these novellas were older, maybe he's just grown as a writer. Maybe I just picked the wrong book to start with. Maybe his novels are better than his short stories. I don't know. But I was just really disappointed with this, especially because I've heard so much about Ronald Malfi, and I was expecting like something amazing, and it was just kind of meh. Again, not terrible. I'm sure, I'm sure I'm alone in this. I'm sure there are other people who really would get into this and really enjoy it. But for me, I don't know. It just didn't really work for me. I've still got the other collection of novellas, and so we'll see if I ever get to that. But, I mean, if you guys are fans of Ronald Malfi, like, let me know. Did I just pick the wrong one to start with? Where would you recommend I go next if I want to get into Ronald Malfi? Because I could see the potential. I thought, he's not a bad writer. I just thought a lot of the stories in here just felt like reheated horror leftovers, I don't know. Like I said, maybe I just picked the wrong one. Let me know. But that one just turned out to be a little bit disappointing, unfortunately. So my last couple reads, they're both comic books. I don't normally talk about comic books on here because, one, I don't read as many as I used to. And I don't know. I always feel like reading comics is like cheating. I know other people don't feel that way, but for me personally, like, if I can read a graphic novel in like 45 minutes to an hour, like, do I really feel like I've read a book? You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like it's cheat. I'm inflating my numbers by doing that. But as I said, I've been in a really bad slump lately, and I just wanted to read something, sort of fun and kid friendly, and and not so text heavy as well. It's a visual medium, and it was spooky season. I was watching all this Goosebumps stuff. I was showing the Haunted Mask and stuff to the girls. The classic TV episode. Love Goosebumps. And I found out about these Goosebumps comics. So I was like, why not? I'll try some. And because I had just watched the Haunted Mask, I decided to read the Haunted Mask graphic novel adapted by Maddi Gonzalez. This just came out in September, and we just happened to watch the Haunted Mask, and I was like, why not? It's the perfect companion piece. And yeah, it's pretty great. The art is very vibrant and colorful. It's very sort of anime influenced, as you can see. But I really liked it. It's the art is very dynamic and colorful, and it's very fun. You can see the Haunted Mask there. It has that very sort of goblinoid appearance as it does in the original book cover. One of the things I thought was interesting that the artist actually pointed out, the ears are shaped like the G in the Goosebumps logo, which I thought was cool. And that's one of the things I enjoyed about this book. It's the Haunted Mask story. If you don't know, it's about this girl, Carly Beth, who's a scaredy cat, and she's always getting bullied and teased and pranked, because she's so easy to scare, especially by these two guys, Chuck and Steve, who are like sort of her nemeses. And she decides, like, I don't want to be cute this Halloween. I want to be scary. I want to get back at them. And she goes to this mysterious shop where she finds the shopkeeper who sells her this creepy mask that turns out to be more than just a mask. As it says on the back, are you wearing the mask, or is the mask wearing you? So yeah, it's a classic Goosebumps story. It's one of the most iconic ones in the whole run of the books. As I said, it was the pilot episode of the TV show, and it's one of the best episodes of the TV show. The TV show was very hit or miss. Some of the episodes were like pretty faithful adaptations, and some of the episodes were just cheese, and more cheese, and not even good cheese, just bad. But the pilot episode was great. It was one of the good ones, and in fact, in a lot of the ways, it actually improves on the story. But So yeah, this is just a very straightforward adaptation of the story. There's a few sort of modern touches, like, you know, you see Carly Beth and her friend Sabrina, you know, instant messaging each other and like FaceTiming and stuff. But other than that, it is basically the original story, and it's a well-told version of that. So I really enjoyed that. You know, you can see you can see the mask here, you know, and you can see also Carly Beth's outfit. You know, that's the iconic outfit that she wore on the original cover art, which is really cool. And yeah, and just I just love, yeah, just the expressions, you know, the colors, you know, the light and shadow, you know, it's just very well drawn. But one of the things I also enjoyed as a Goosebumps fan is that there's loads of sort of little references here and there. Like, for example, when she goes to the store, the shopkeeper shows her a bunch of masks, and you can see, how about this one? I think it's a TV character. That's R.L. Stine there, the author of the Goosebumps books. And you can also see in the corner there, that little dog poster. That's the dog with the creepy eyes from the intro of the Goosebumps TV show, along with, as you can see, you know, Phantom of the Opera and Carnival of Souls. And then there's another one, and here you can see, if it focuses, here you can see these creepy dummies, the Deadly Wedding Dolls. That is Mr. Wood and Mary Ellen, who are Slappy's brother and bride, respectively. And, you know, obviously, Slappy is kind of the mascot of the Goosebumps universe. You know, the Night of the Living Dummy and all that. So there's just loads of little references like that in there for Goosebumps fans that I just really enjoyed. And also, like, the art isn't afraid to get pretty, like, gruesome at times. There's a scene where Carly Beth returns to the shop to find out that, you know, the mask is her face now. And just the art here is, like, pretty horrific, you know? Just the grotesqueness, the torment, the pain, you know, it's very dynamic and very, like, very scary and emotional for kids, you know, which I love, you know. And in the back, there's, like, some little extras. Like, so they do these little, you know, those, like, 4-coma, you know, the 4-panel comics that you get in, like, manga sometimes that are comedic. You know, they do some of those. They have some, like, behind-the-scenes stuff, which is really interesting. And you even have a little Curly cameo here, who was the actual mascot for Goosebumps. He appeared in a bunch of promotional items. He's hidden somewhere in the book. It says, "Can you spot where we've hidden an appearance of Curly the skeleton?" I couldn't find him, but maybe somebody else has. But yeah, it's just really cool to see all of this stuff as a Goosebumps fan. You know, it's just so nice to know that, you know, this franchise is alive and well. You know, we had the movies, we've got the TV show, now we've got these new graphic novels. So it's just really great to see one of my favorite stories done in this really loving, dynamic, colorful way. And I really hope they do more of these. I don't know what they're going to adapt next. Of course, I hope for a Werewolf of Fever Swamp adaptation, but we'll see. But I will definitely look into it, especially if they're all done like this. I would love more of those. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then I read another Goosebumps comic because, well, you'll see why. This is Goosebumps Secrets of the Swamp by Marieke Nijkamp. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I'm sorry. And art by Yasmin Flores Montanez. Again, I'm sorry. But, you know, one guess as to why I was interested in this. I just mentioned Werewolf of Fever Swamp, after all. And this indeed deals with Fever Swamp. So yeah, this focuses on Fever Swamp. This isn't an adaptation of any other stories. This is its own original story about this girl named Blake, who goes to live at Fever Swamp with her aunt. And she's a big fan of this MMO called Lore Hunter, which involves, like, hunting monsters and stuff. And she meets this girl named Lily, who basically says, like, hey, let's go exploring in the swamp. You know, you talk about, like, wanting to hunt monsters. Let's hunt monsters for real, because, of course, there's all these rumors about the swamp having monsters in it. And they discover that, indeed, the swamp does have monsters in it, werewolves. But then Blake is left behind by Lily after they're trying to escape these creatures, and it turns out that there's sort of a long-standing feud going on between the werewolves and the werewolf hunters of Fever Swamp, and the werewolves turn out to be not as bad as originally thought. That all sounds well and good, right? I was really excited about this, you know, Fever Swamp, werewolves, you know, the main character is, as you can see, she's disabled there, which is, you know, cool bit of representation. I don't think there's ever been a disabled character in Goosebumps, as far as I know. I mean, there's hundreds of books out there, so maybe, but this was just really disappointing, especially compared to the previous graphic novel. For one, it's a lot shorter. It's about 20 pages shorter. The graphic novel is about 6 issues worth of material. This was originally a miniseries. This was 5 issues. The story is I just feel like there was no room to develop the story. As you can tell from kind of what I hinted at, it's very much going for that sort of X-Men-esque, like who's the real monster, who's the monster and who is the man, type of story, where the werewolves are all altruistic and perfect and the humans are all evil, cartoon villains, which is how it's depicted. There's no real nuance between, the werewolves and the humans. And we don't even really get to learn much about either one. We learn more about the werewolves than we do about the werewolf hunters. But the hunters don't really... We don't know anything about them. We just know, like, they're hunting the werewolves and they're bad, and that's it, and whatever, Which, on some level, is fine, because this is a Goosebumps, story. It's meant for kids. But, there's simplistic in a good way, and there's simplistic in a bad way. This felt simplistic in a bad way, where it was just very surface level. It kind of felt like the first draft of a story that needed to be revised and developed and fleshed out a little bit more. As soon as, we're encountering the werewolves within, issue number 2, and, and we're suddenly learning all of this backstory that we've had no time to really, develop, or, and that we haven't really had time to, luxuriate in the atmosphere of it or anything, and the art is okay, but it's a little wonky looking sometimes. Some of the perspective looks strange, and the characters look off model pretty frequently. You can see the size of her eyes changes there, and the perspective's a little weird, so it's not quite as dynamic and interesting as the previous graphic novel. And the werewolves, which I was very excited about, kind of just look like fluffy little dogs, which is okay, but, again, it's very different from, you look at this cover and you see, this drooling maw with, rows of sharp teeth, and you're like, oh, wow, I can't wait for some good, monster action. And then, you get that. It's just a little disappointing. And again, and I could live with, obviously, I love werewolves in all their guises. And I'm not going to turn down, sympathetic werewolves. I love a sympathetic werewolf. I love werewolves that get to be good guys, werewolves that get to be protagonists instead of just, second fiddle to vampires or something, But this was just so, in my opinion, it was just such a generic, sort of uninspired story that it didn't really matter, the werewolves being good just felt like they were trying to shoehorn in, this, ham-fisted message about, who's the real monster here, but it was just, I don't know, it wasn't that well done. And again, the art on the covers, and also they have the individual covers in between each chapter, which have this more sort of, almost cartoony, not cartoony, but sort of I don't know, it reminds me of something out of a children's book, and I really liked the art on the covers more than the interior art, and I found myself kind of wishing, this one was my favorite. I almost found myself kind of wishing, man, couldn't they have just, Bill Underwood, couldn't he have just done the interiors? And these covers on the front, these were variant covers by Clara Meath, and again, as you can see, much more dynamic and exciting, and the werewolves are, big and monstrous, And then, and you can still have, the cutesy ones there, as well. So again, I just found myself just disappointed. The story wasn't great, the art was okay, but nothing special. It was just very disappointing, which I hate to end off on a disappointing read, but that's how it goes sometimes. But I am glad I read these. I'm always happy for more werewolves, and I'm really happy that this franchise is being kept alive, because, the Haunted Mask was just published this year. This is from 2021, and this is part of an ongoing series from IDW that I think, it might have ended, but it was going into the 2020s, so, the franchise is alive and well. That makes me really happy. I hope it keeps going for another 30 years, I also didn't realize until I was halfway through these that these kind of count for a Tie-In Tember that was being held by Roy and was created by It Came From the Pages. These weren't my official choices for Tie-In Tember, but we can say that these count. So yeah, Roy, there you go. I read some tie-in stuff. I am reading a book for Tie-In Tember that I'm not finished with yet, but I'm almost there. I've got about 80 pages left, so I'll talk about that once I finish. But yeah, that was what I've been up to. Let me know if you guys have read any of these. What did you read for Halloween? What sort of spooky stuff were you into? What did you get up to? But yeah, until then, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.